on 95.3 FM in Windhoek, Desert Radio. The bold
focus for this morning, like I said, is Joshua Maponga, who will be speaking to us. Joshua, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for sparing time and inviting me into your space here.
Good morning to you. How are
Beautiful
you?
space, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful
Really do
studio.
appreciate it.
When I grow up, I want to be like you, you know.
I want to be like you, actually, Joshua. How are you this morning?
All is well.
All is well?
Yeah.
Perfect. Now, just to start us off, I guess, Joshua, let's start us off by talking to us about the One Africa narrative. Speak to us about that.
The One Africa narrative is the oldest of them all, in the backdrop of OAU, in the backdrop of SADC or COMESA, the pioneers such as Kwame Nkrumah, You know, Lumumbas, the Kaundas, the Nyereres, the whole conversation to undo the Berlin Conference. And if you remember very well that a group of white men sit in Berlin and they decide how to cut Africa into a cake, and none of the Africans were involved or included in that meeting.
That's right.
100 years later, we are still struggling with what people decided to do with us as a continent.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, due to the neo-colonialistic, nationalistic boundaries and borders, now we have countries that are further on entrenching the same narrative of a divided Africa. So how do you talk to the Khoisan and the Bushmen who are living in Botswana, some are in Namibia, and etc.? They've had this space to themselves.
Yeah.
Now a white man comes and puts a line and says, you can't cross here. Like really? You look at the river Zambezi and look at Limpopo, look at Congo. So this whole concept of smaller countries makes it easy for the colonial world and superpowers, particularly continents, such as America, such as Europe, to abuse a country. Because here you are, Namibia, 12 million people, for argument's sake. How do you stand up against China with 1.3 billion people?
Yeah.
Financially, militarily, you're overpowered. So it's convenient for the international world to deal with countries. But once Africa can come together, 2.8 billion people, we can come up with the concept of a one financial system, one stock exchange, for example, one military base. We will get, in fact, a seat on the Security Council.
Yeah.
Right now, all of us, 2.8 billion people, are not represented on the Security Council. NATO and what, and small little countries like Sweden, small little countries like France in terms of space, they all have seats. And on those seats, they discuss the security of the whole world. So now I think this One Africa concept needs to be raised not only to financial conversation, to a cultural conversation, but also needs to extend itself into a military conversation, academic conversation, linguistic conversation, entertainment conversation. I've never seen Africans so excited about soccer in Europe and spending so much money on paraphernalia, etc., supporting Europe. They take lots of money on our media. Namibia must be paying a lot of money to super sports and what to be pumping in this narrative of colonial sports, colonial movies, colonial music, and we are taking all our hard-earned cash and feeding the same system that is abusing us. So the One Africa concept speaks to an entire collage of the 7 pillars of AIMF, as I tried to explain. That's our finances, our economics, our education, our military, our language, our environment, our mining, so that we can have a solid continent to which we all must be proud of.
Yeah. Now, you are now currently visiting Namibia, of course. So can you perhaps just, tell our listeners and viewers what you have planned, what should Namibians be expecting during your stay and your visit here?
The biggest thing to expect is me. I'm here in blood and flesh.
Yeah.
But you come to the function. We're ready to be challenged. You come there ready to get yourself equipped and have a different narrative. And since we are doing storytelling, I will always say it that history always takes the complexion of its authors.
Yeah.
And until Africans pick up their pens to write their own story, to write their own narrative, we will constantly be referred to as footnotes on our conversations rather than subject matters. So yeah, come on, let's have fun. Let's have fun.
And let's also talk a bit about Farmers of Thought. I see you have a nice Farmers of Thought shirt there.
The Poya Media just gave me my t-shirt.
100%.
Yeah.
I was speaking to Ilka behind the scenes, and she was telling me that people can also buy that merch for that's just 150 if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
But speak to us about the Farmers of Thought in collaboration with Poya Media. Talk to us about that collaboration and what's happening.
Land itself.
Now, look, you have been a keen supporter of Pan-Africanism. We have dived into that just a bit, as we started the conversation. But we understand of late you have joined the ruling ZANU-PF party in Zimbabwe as part of the campaign crew. Does this mean you've joined politics?
And by the way, this for me, that is the most offensive thing. People can just gulp and eat all media stories, and they want to write their own story, which is not true. The real story is that I am not supporting ZANU-PF. I'm not supporting MDC. I'm supporting Zimbabwe. And whatever development or programs that are happening, you have two options, of course.
Yeah.
I can work in Zimbabwe with opposition to challenge the government, or I can work with the government to encourage positive movement in terms of the project that they're doing. It's actually for that reason that I went back to Zimbabwe. Because I was watching and reading public media stories and all the negative stories that are there. And what time I said, let me just go home. So I drove home. I flew home. Flew and drove home.
Yeah.
Then started walking around the country. I saw roads are being built. I saw infrastructures are coming together. Parliament buildings are coming together. And all this development. And I said to myself, I want to become part of the development, part of the narrative. And I've actually set up a studio also in Zimbabwe, in Mount Pleasant, almost something similar to yours here, where we are just collecting good stories that are happening in the country. So yes, there's a lot of bad things happening. Other people can do that. But I think from the media space that I've worked for the past 33 years, I've just made a positive decision to say, I want to report all the good things. And that is psychology.
Yeah.
I cannot just come to you and say, you got ugly hands, you got an ugly head, you got an ugly beard, ugly shoes. Can't you just find even something nice on me, which you can say? And I think this is the weakness of local politics, particularly African politics, where you are either opposition or you are pro this. For me, it's not there. If the opposition party does what is right, if the ruling party does what is right, if the ruling party does something which is wrong, hey guys, can we not do it better like this?
Yeah.
And for me, this whole obsession, which comes from instrumental conditioning, you must belong to. You must. Come on, what happened to freedom? What the same democracy you're talking about, that people are free to choose what they want to. Why does it feel like the opposition party wants to own me or the ruling party wants to own me? What is in it? What is democracy? Is democracy not freedom to express yourself? And the whole narrative that says you can only reason from a position of opposition, it's altogether distorted. So people can say what they want. I know what I'm doing.
Now, many people who follow you and in your teachings have believed that you stand for the truth. And I guess questions around that have also, come up and arise, especially since, you've gone back to Zimbabwe, seen the situation. They've been asking, what are you doing in your native country in Zimbabwe to call on the government in the country to respect human rights, to try and, have a better governance system? What are you doing in that regard?
And again, from the time I was in South Africa to the time I was in Zimbabwe, some of these people who have expectations on people have never contributed a dime to my development. In fact, some of them have been the worst critics of all, discouraging me to do everything. I've hardly been in the country for 2 months, 3 months, and I already have this big list of stuff that I must achieve. You must speak for this. You must speak against that. And I think some of these expectations are not practical. It's not about me doing something. It's about us working together as a country to do something together. Therefore, it's not about shouting for human rights, because some of the human rights organizations, frankly speaking, they are Trojan horses of colonial masters. They are on donor money from the CIA. They're being sponsored by the European Union for regime changes. So it's not all NGOs that have clean hands. And some of them are deliberately been put into the country to sponsor and drive the narrative of destroying governments. We've seen the CIA in Afghanistan. We've seen them in Iraq, in Libya, in Vietnam, in Japan. And they've not changed their systems. Right here in Botswana, they've not changed their strategy. In Zambia, they are also found in Mozambique through the ISIS and all these things. And one side, they say these Muslims are this and this. You go behind that again, the same sponsor with the system.
Yeah.
Now, how foolish can I be, having traveled and having studied so much, for me to even think that the concept of human rights is actually an issue? Can America deal with its own human rights in America? Can Europe deal with its own human rights in Europe? What's happening in Ukraine? Who is talking about human rights? Is colonialism and the decapitating of heads in Namibia not a human rights issue? 20,000 people are still lying in German museums, and you want to lecture me about human rights? Like, really? You can't do that. You can't do that. Let's talk about human rights being the right of a country to sell its minerals at its value, the right of a country to determine their own future without interruptions from other countries, the right of a country to be sovereign. For me, those are more critical human rights. The right of a country not to have sponsored militias and with guns that are being sponsored by those who want to lecture us on human rights. You understand what I'm saying? We don't even have a single factory in Africa that produces guns. Why are people still killing each other in Congo? And you talk about human rights. You talk about. I'm directing this to you, that when people are saying you focus on this, I want us to look at the bigger picture.
And looking at that bigger picture, you mentioned something that I think is absolutely 100%. Africa is filled with natural resources, right? Many resources that can improve our day-to-day operations as Africans. But a lot of African countries have been struggling to do that over the past few years. How do you think we can all improve that as a Southern African region, as an African continent together? How do we use our own resources to improve our day-to-day living?
It's a war. You cannot talk that language and you're not talking war. Because the whole establishment of the African economy is at the backdrop of the colonial multinational businesses, the Anglo-Saxon businesses, the German businesses, the French businesses. This goes for food, this goes for education, this goes for infrastructure, and this goes for manufacturing, this goes for mining. And these companies have no interest in terms of developing the continent. They are there for the bottom line and profit to their masters. So what do? You come to a country, you set up all these businesses, take Africans as cheap labor. And what are they working for? They're not working for the construction and the building of their country. They are working for survival. Who is taking the money out of the country? So at the end of the day, when political leaders, and I'm saying this very loudly to all political leaders, when political leaders go to war and they come back and they take over the government, listen very carefully. From Zimbabwe to Tanzania to South Africa to Namibia, listen carefully. You go to war to fight. When you come into government, you forget that governments don't run on guns. government run on economic software. But when you get into government, there's one thing you undermine, is that the businesses that have been established, they are not your businesses. They are foreign businesses. So here we are as Africans with political power in our hands, but the economic power is in another hand. Then constantly the government now has to start fighting as to how do we, however, this is the uprising of in South Africa, for example, the EFF, the Dudula concepts. This is the uprising because people are now beginning to discover that political power without economic muscle to determine, in fact, politics is a prostitute of economics. He who pays the bills determines the policies. So Oppenheimer and Rupert's in South Africa, they don't need to vote. Their money votes for them. Just put 10 million here. Who do we put as a president? Let's invest in that one. Next election, please, we're done with him. Who is the next one? Let's put this one. So the politicians are changing. But the white hand that is holding money is not shifting an inch. And therefore we understand as Africans, until we begin to develop businesses as Africans, and we own our businesses, and we build capacity of funds, like it's happening in Zimbabwe, which is an offensive statement to the West, because they closed down BP, they closed down Caltex, closed down everything else, and there was a gap on one fuel, want people to strike because there's no fuel. And a young man there by the name of Kuda Tagwire saw the gap in the market. Oh, they've closed fuel, negotiated with Dubai and etc., got fuel in. Now he's the biggest fuel runner in the country. No, he's corrupt. He has a relationship with the government. For crying out loud, when you go to China, will you find an Indian doing business with the Chinese government? When you go to America, would you find a Namibian doing business with an American government? You find a white man doing business with the white man. You find an Englishman doing business in England. So what is wrong in Namibia if the biggest supplier of fuel in Namibia is a Namibian? If the biggest manufacturer of diamonds and etc. in Namibia is a Namibian? So Africans have a problem, because once an African brother or sister makes it by having a relationship with the government and making money, then we always want to say there must be a white man there, then our monies are safe, which is not a good narrative. So we need to start talking about how do we capacitate ourselves economically. And until we have money in our hands to sponsor our politicians, constantly our politicians are subject to be sponsored by another white hand. And we would wonder why our leaders are coconuts and Uncle Toms who actually walk into government to protect the same white capital that has brought us into this mess.
But do you think there's sort of a country or region, at the very least in Africa, that other African countries can use as sort of a benchmark, to learn from in terms of, social cohesion, in terms of politics, in terms of running the economy? Is there that one utopian African country that all other African countries can use as a benchmark to learn from, at the very least?
Until we understand that we are going to grow as a continent together, you have pockets here and there of the economic model that Zimbabwe is coming up with. I think it will be quite interesting to see how it pans itself out in the next 20, 30 years, bearing in mind we're coming from a 400-year period of colonial rule. But I want the first model is that every African country must own its land. Because land is the means of production. So it would be funny to find that you have a country, but you don't have access to the resources of your own country. Then you politic around everything else. Speak about everything else except the most important estate, the estate of the land. So yes, when Mugabe took back the land from the colonial masters, whole world went berserk, including our friends, neighboring friends, African countries. Sanctions were the blessing. Why? Because you're now talking you're playing with the jewels of the economy itself when it comes to European economies, because there's this big boy sitting in Lisbon, in London, in New York, who have vested interest in your countries there, and they remote control the governments of those places because they have means to resources. So the real model I'll be talking about, stop every politicking. Just start talking land. You discover that even Namibia or South Africa, you've been sanctions before you finish pronouncing the word land.
So does that mean you are pro land expropriation without compensation?
My brother, to be clear and frank with you, don't even grace those things with the beautiful words. Land was taken away from us without the law. And I believe taking it back, why must we use the law for taking away that which was taken without law? There was disrespect of the highest order for people to be evicted from their houses and be dumped in dry places where it was non-productive. Here we are now paying rents, paying what, in our own land, the land of our forefathers. Now you must pay to have access to land. So the judiciary system has been equally manipulated by the colonial system. Now the society is struggling to make sense of a democratic system which is foreign to our own African people, and to glorify that with academic conversation and political pontification, I think it's mischief of the highest order. I've been in Europe. I was an illegal immigrant. I was in America. I was a foreigner there. I come to Africa. What am I? Where is home then? So we need again to zoom in into the proper conversation. Can the African be dignified enough? And I think that democracy without dignity is an insult.
Yeah.
You can't be talking about justice without fairness. What is fair? It is the restoration of the sovereignty of the African people as a people.
Now, Joshua, just before we leave you, the discussions that we've been having, is this what, Namibians and I guess the rest of SADC can expect from your SADC tour? Seeing that you are very passionate about, community development, you are very passionate about, Pan-Africanism generally. Is this what your followers and your listeners can expect?
I decided to start off in Namibia for one reason. You guys are so fortunate. We have one of the rarest communities that is almost being pushed into extinction. I'm looking at the Himba tribes, for example. Rural and uncivilized as it is. And now when you, through your development and etc., you begin to push and encroach into them. And almost, we will wipe away sciences and technologies. We will wipe away another generation, and it's happening in our eyes right here in the country. And in the backdrop of that, I thought I would also come here and say, if a nation says we don't want that, we want to live as ourselves, can we respect that and also protect even indigenous people to that extent that they should live and preserve part of what is left? This whole industrialization we are rushing into, all of us, this whole hip-hop story, this whole urbanization story, by the time we're at the end of it and we are robots and we have chips and we've become machines, we're going to miss this other part where we say, okay, we've seen it all, but where is humanity? So, and I think I'm starting from Namibia with that feeling, a deja vu feeling that we could be the last generation that actually witnesses and sees this before it is actually extinguished into extinction. And once it's lost forever.
Yeah. When you go to Botswana, when you go to South Africa, what are the conversations that you will drive specifically to those countries?
The region of Zimbabwe, Botswana, South Africa, Namibia, this entire region, we need to understand that we have a common space. And my best place of interest is the Chobe River and Zambezi River. And I would want to market that as a new city for the Central African space. It's still underdeveloped, right at the Kazungula border, where the 5 countries are meeting.
Yeah.
That whole place, there's enough water, there's enough everything. And I wonder why we build these cities in the deserts, in the midst of nowhere, where there are no resources. There's nothing, whereas here is a beautiful paradise with game, with water, big rivers, Chobe River and Zambezi River meeting, Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Angola is just a few kilometers away. How about we begin to talk about building new cities, ecologically friendly cities, and we can, so I'm actually interested to see how the governments will be responding, and in this concept of building new cities and attracting the diaspora environment also to come around and invest money into that space. I'm passionate about that project.
Joshua, I really do wish we can, talk for eons on, I think, many elements that we've touched on. It's conversations I think people need to have. people need to start thinking about. Unfortunately, we have run out of time in our discussion this morning. But just for the benefit of our listeners, your one-night event at the National Theatre of Namibia, just talk to us about when that will be and how people can come through for that.
We're doing a book launch on Friday. Friday at the mall.
That's right.
And now from the mall in the evening, then we are having the music, entertainment, storytelling. And you come and meet me unplugged. I'm playing with some local bands there.
Wow.
Some young people and taking some rounds today, getting some clothes done, some fashion. It's going to be hot. You come and experience me basically in my element. And this is a revolution that I think all of us need to. If you're in Windhoek, if you're in Namibia, please just pop in there, grab yourself a book, grab yourself a t-shirt. But above all, if you can afford it, come and spend the night and let us have some meaningful African drumming. I brought some traditional music instruments and some mix it with the old and the young, a bit of hip hop and there, and some traditional African indigenous music story. And that's gonna be fun.
Sounds enticing.
You can't miss it. You can't miss it. This is a good date. I mean, if you have a girlfriend out there, have a boyfriend out there, and you want to take them to an intellectually challenging environment, I mean, come around. It's a few questions and answers, and I'll do a small lecture there, of course.
Well, there you heard it, guys. Motivational speaker, social entrepreneur, and musician Joshua Maponga. He is in Namibia. He will be at Exclusive Books that's at the Grove Mall this Friday, where there will be a book launch, and then there will be a one-night event at the National Theatre of Namibia. So do make sure you do catch him there. Like you said, there will be music, there will be storytelling, nice entertainment, intellectual conversations, like the conversation you've heard him and I have this morning, which I think are important conversations.
And there's a men's conference also, I think, up north.
And there's a men's conference.
In Katima Mlilo. We're going to do a boat cruise there and go and have something in the island. Men, this is strictly for men. Strictly for men. Sorry, women. We'll do another day. But this time around in Katima, please get your tickets also ready. There's a River Lodge or something somewhere there. We're going to be there for a men's conference,
Joshua, I appreciate you so much for making time for us this morning.
Thanks to you and thanks to Poya Media,
Definitely. Thanks to Poya Media as well. The time on the clock is 8 o'clock. That does conclude our chat with Joshua Maponga, but you can catch him at Exclusive Books at the Grove Mall this Friday. Of course, there will also be a one-night event at the National Theatre of Namibia. Motivational speaker, social entrepreneur, musician, a man that's very passionate about Pan-Africanism, about community development, and so many other things that pertain to you as an African. Please do make sure you do catch him.